Okay. I have no idea. I wasn't following the news. Yeah, maybe. Okay, it says I'm live. What I need to know is, can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay. Let's see. Hi, people. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you hear the music? Let me know. I'm curious. Can you hear me? Okay. Alright, so that's going. That's going. Do I need to undo this? Yes. Okay. People, let me know. Let me know. It says I'm live. So please just let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can see me. I need audio for me. I need audio for the music. And I need audio for... And I need the video. The music that ought to be broadcasting. Someone, let me know. Hang on a second. Hang on. Let's see. Okay, it should be good. Hang on. Let's see. Alright, public. So yes, it should be working. Should be working. People, let me know. Please, someone, if someone is here, a few people should be here. Let me know. Okay. Josh. Can you hear me? Can you hear the music? Can you see the videos? Right, the dual screen. Please let me know. I tested it earlier. It should be good to go. But please let me know. I need someone to let me know from there. Hey, you've got a phone. Oh, cool. You hear music and you hear me as well? Perfect. Wait, baby, hang on. Okay. What's up?
You don't have a video going on the just white screen with...
Yeah, just the white screen and the music. Okay, good. People, in that case, it's the Nazarite bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. Hopefully, this Sunday reaction will be good, and let's dive right into it. Last week was a disaster. Hopefully this week will be not a disaster. Huh? The audio and the video and the sync and the feedback, it was terrible. Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in, and hopefully this will be good to go. What we have is two videos which Robert Harrison sent by Ash Mays, right, who is, if I'm not mistaken, a Messianic Jew. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I have a lovely cup of tea right here, and we will dive right in.
According to Judaism, Christianity is idolatry. According to the rabbis and rabbinical tradition, if you believe in Jesus as the Messiah, you are guilty of heresy, and if you believe in him as the Son of God, you're guilty of blasphemy.
Right, okay. So right off the bat, there's nothing wrong with believing someone is Messiah or a potential Messiah. I don't exactly know where he's getting this idea that it's heresy. Even if someone was not properly anointed, even if someone did not receive the crown, believing someone is a potential Messiah, I don't know if that's particularly heresy. Let's keep going.
Jewish thought and culture, Christianity is considered an idolatrous practice and religion. Now, there is a biblical pattern that refutes this claim.
Oh, and I'm going to jump back and forth in the chat just to see that everything is indeed going, because I have such little confidence in the audio and the video and the dual screen, and I don't do this very often.
And every response that the rabbinical system can give to that challenge actually makes it more and more awkward for the rabbinical position towards Christianity. So let's get into that a little bit. In the Hebrew scriptures, in the Bible, every time that Israel sins with mass idolatry, with apostasy in that way, sinning against God, turning away from him with idolatry, every time that happens, God sends a prophet or somebody like that to rebuke the children of Israel, to get them to turn away from their idolatrous practices and come back to God, and he gives warnings of what will happen if they don't do so.
Right, so this has gone on since the time of the Torah, going into the time of the judges, the time of the kings and the prophets, and so on and so forth. What he's saying so far is exactly right, right? There would be a judge, there would be a prophet, there would be someone who would grab Israel by the balls and say, "Hey, pay attention."
Now, you see this with Moses, with the golden calf, rebuking Israel. God sends him, warns him to stop them from what they're doing. Many thousands, 3,000 are killed that day because of it. You see this with the kings of Israel. If you look in the book of Chronicles, it's clearly laid out. These priests, these leadership, the leadership of Israel turns away from God in this way, makes things unclean, and God sends his prophets day after day after day, rebuking and begging the people of Israel to turn away from idolatrous practices.
It's not just to turn away from idolatrous practices, it's to turn back to the covenant of the Hebrews and to the Hebrew God. I mean, maybe that's just me nitpicking, but, it's something.
However, in the first century, in the end of the Second Temple period, that is missing. Thousands of people, thousands of Jews, including many of the leadership, are following Jesus, believing in him as the Son of God, as the Messiah, and turning away from the mainstream Judaism.
Son of God and Messiah are not the same thing. Once again, I have to take issue with this. Do you believe that it's literally the Son of God, and that God in physical form, part of a Trinity, or do you simply believe he is a king of Israel, an anointed king? Big difference. Let's keep going.
In this supposedly idolatrous practice, thousands, mass conversion to this. It was early Jewish followers of Jesus, then called Christians, but thousands of people from the Jewish people turning towards this supposedly new religion. And there is no prophet. There's no rebuke. God does not send a prophet to rebuke the children of Israel for this supposedly idolatrous practice. And if it
Right, so prophecy was the spirit of prophecy was taken away towards the beginning of the Second Temple era. It's said in the Talmud or the Midrash, right, the external teachings, that the spirit of prophecy was given to children and fools. You could argue over the nature of what a fool is, halachically, rabbinically, traditionally. I won't get into it right now. There are two mainstream forms of prophecy, right? There's the spirit of prophecy, ruach nevuah, and there's the spirit of sacredness, known as ruach hakodesh, which some translate as Holy Spirit, but it's not quite like the Holy Spirit of the Christian variety. For instance, the books of the prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all the minor prophets, right, like Hosea and all of those, Malachi, Haggai, Zechariah, they are with the spirit of prophecy. And then there are the scrolls, like Lamentation, and even though that's by Jeremiah, right, or the scroll of Esther, Ezra and Nehemiah, right? We have the Torah and the prophets and the writings. The writings are lower in that hierarchy because they were given in the spirit of sacredness, not through the spirit of prophecy. It's a lower form of prophecy that was not taken away and still can be achieved and still is achieved ever since and even to this day and age. So there were no prophets. There were people who were imbued, let's say, with that spirit of sacredness, that Ruach HaKodesh, but there were, traditionally speaking, rabbinically speaking, no prophets after Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi.
Was idolatrous, and if God saw it that way, why didn't he send a prophet to rebuke Israel? Now, there are rabbinical answers to this challenge, and unfortunately, it makes it very, very, very much more awkward as you try to challenge this and go through the steps. So what is the challenge to this claim? Well, the rabbinical challenge is that prophecy ended with the prophet Malachi, with Malachi, much earlier. There were no prophets anymore, and so there was no prophet to come and rebuke the people of Israel, who en masse were the early converts to what became Christianity. So there was no prophecy, there was no prophet to send. The problem with this challenge is that it presupposes the authority and claims of the rabbis as true.
Well, look, this entire thing presupposes that authority and those claims to be true. You could throw it all out the window and say, so in that case, why is he making this video? He could have just as well, no, I didn't listen to the rest of it. I'm listening to it now for the first time and watching it for the first time along with you. But if that's, yes, it does presuppose this. This is rabbinic Judaism, Orthodox Judaism. This is the tradition, the Masorah, right? Brought down throughout the generations. And he may as well, if you're not going to presuppose that there's some sort of a validity to the claim and authenticity and authority involved to some degree, you might as well just come and say, the rabbis have no authority and they're not real sages, and that's it. Be done with it. So, okay, let's keep going. I might be jumping the gun, but let's keep going.
Meaning, was the fact that there was no prophets a has to have been, or was it a happen to be? Meaning, was the last prophet because God made a definitive line that there's no more prophecy? Or did it just happen to be the last prophet recorded? So you'd have to presuppose the rabbinical claim that prophecy had to end then. Okay? Even if we steelman the position of the rabbis and grant that claim, this presents an even more awkward dilemma for the rabbinical stance towards Christianity. Here's the problem.
Yes.
If the prophecy ended, if prophecy as a whole ended and there were no prophets, because at that time Israel was so spiritually low that there was no more prophecy among Israel.
Oh, wait. It glitched. Am I good? Hang on a second. My camera glitched. Okay. Seems I'm good to go. Let's go.
Why then is one of the prior prophecies about this period, the Second Temple, from Haggai, from one of the prophets, that the Second Temple will be greater than the first and will be a place that God brings peace?
Well, again, before he answers, I'll just say it's not necessarily via prophecy and prophets that this peace shall come to pass. There is this idea that exists, which is that let's say nowadays, where there is no traditionally, again, mainstream prophecy, and yet we see that there are prophecies being fulfilled not by way of a divine messenger, angel, leader, judge imbued with spirit of prophecy or spirit of sacredness, but seemingly without any of that by the way of nature, right? Seemingly of its own accord through the happenings of the world and the goings on of the world, where you could see or say or make the claim and the argument that God has no hand in this, God is left entirely, and this is just things happening of their own accord, rolling along. And some say that this is indeed the greatness of this time, where it's God working behind the scenes in such a way where it looks like it's coming into being by ways of nature, right, and the natural law and the progression of society and civilization and whatnot. In the very same way that the book of Esther does not mention the name of God, right? Esther, Hester, meaning to be hidden. There is the great prophecy in the Torah portion of Ha'azinu towards the end of Deuteronomy, where God says that He will hide His face, and there is a double hiding there. It says, Haster astir panai, I will hide the hiding of my face. I've said this many times, there's this idea of knowing that God is hiding his face, as it were, and then there's not even knowing that and not quite understanding what it is or who it is that is being hidden, or that anything is hidden to begin with. And yet the processes are wrought through divine revelation, even if we don't have a specific judge, leader, prophet, who is imbued with that spirit of prophecy in order to point to and say, oh yes, this is definitely God working his revelation through this person, through these times, in this way.
In Haggai, in one of the prophets, it's very, very blatantly written that the second temple will be greater than the first and be a place where God finally brings peace. There was no Ark of the Covenant in the second temple.
Wait, hang on a second. Is it the second temple? I now don't recall it doesn't say, hang on. Let's read the English and then the Hebrew. The glory of this last house, not second house, last house, shall be greater than the first one, said the Lord of hosts, and in this place I will grant peace, says the Lord of hosts. Gadol yihye kvod habayit hazeh ha'acharon min harishon, amar Adonai tzvaot, ubamakom hazeh eten shalom ne'um Adonai tzvaot. Well, it says the last, it says ha'acharon. It doesn't say the second one. You can make the argument that this prophecy is not about the second temple, but about a future third temple, which will be a house of prayer for all humanity, right? A house of love and worship for all mankind. So, okay, I mean, I might be wrong. I don't recall precisely the context of this specific prophecy in Haggai, granted. So let's go with what Mr. Mays here is saying and say that he does mean the second one, and let's keep going.
There was no Ark of the Covenant in the second temple.
True.
There was no fire from heaven consuming the sacrifices. There was no presence of God. According to the rabbis, the presence of God was gone from the second temple. In what way, then, can you justify a prophecy that says the second temple will be greater than the first, the glory of the second temple will be greater, and that...
Wait. The idea of the Ark of the Covenant not being there, that much is true. I don't recall that there was no divine presence whatsoever in the second temple. You can make the argument that it was lesser because there was no ark. And later on, during the latter days of the second temple, when it was already burned from the inside, right, even though Rome had not yet burnt it from the outside, that the divine dwelling had left, right, the divine feminine presence, the Shekhinah, had left. But only 80 years before the destruction of the Second Temple did things start to get all screwy with the actual ritual worship and with the way certain things would go down daily in the temple. You can very much make the argument this temple stood for about 450 years. You can make the argument that in the beginning the dwelling was there and then it simply left because of the nature of the wrongdoing that was being conducted within it. Let's keep going.
That will be the place that God brings peace. The second temple was destroyed. No peace. False prophecy? Why is there false prophecy in the Jewish Bible? This presents an incredibly awkward dilemma. If the second temple is supposed to be greater than the first, why are none of these things glorious things from the first temple in the second one? Well, the Christian claim is that because Jesus came, the Messiah came in the second temple period. That's why the second temple was more glorious, because according to Christianity, the Son of God, the Messiah, came to the second temple, and that's why it was more glorious. And when we follow that, there's actually another problem from the rabbinical perspective that is kind of the most awkward of the bunch. Rabbinical tradition in the Talmud, and I want to say the Talmud is not written as a polemic against Christianity. They're just writing facts about Jewish history, Jewish law, legends.
Facts. I mean, it's debates and it's arguments and it's discussions. It's where halakha is derived from. And yes, there's lore and legend and myth thrown in there as well. Okay.
Myths. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the Talmud as well. But generally speaking, it's not a polemic against Christianity. It's just a massive book of compiled discussions of rabbis over hundreds of years.
Right.
And in the Talmud, talking about specifically Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiday of atonement for sins, that 40 years prior to the destruction of the
I'm sorry, I said 80 years. It was 40 years. My mistake.
temple, keep that in mind, that the last things of what we're working in the temple, specifically for the Yom Kippur sacrifice, for the goats that would be, for atonement of sin, those things stop working. The lots for which goat would be killed and which...
No, it didn't stop working. That is incorrect. What would happen there, they said, is a couple of things changed that used to be, where the two goats that you would cast a lot, usually the right hand of the high priest would have the name of God and the left hand would have Azazel. And then it stopped being that way and it switched to signify the left side, right? The side of judgment and the side of withholding and the side of din. That it was coming and becoming more apparent and that it was taking more, though that it was gaining more, right? Revelation in the divine revelation, in creation. Likewise, the scarlet string that used to turn white, it did not turn white. But this is not exactly part of the ritual as it is prescribed in the Torah. This is already in the Mishnah and the Talmud. The things that went on in the Torah did keep on happening. Okay.
Goat would be for the sacrifice. That stopped working. The white string, the string didn't turn white anymore, indicating forgiveness. The gates of the temple were opened on their own and could not be shut. These are things written in the Talmud, specifically referencing the Day of Atonement, starting 40 years prior to the destruction of the temple. What happened right around then?
I think it's the
Well, that
Mishnah,
was the
not the
crucifixion
Talmud.
and the
But okay.
resurrection. So Talmudic literature is corroborating that right around the time of the crucifixion, the last remnants of what was working in the temple, specifically for atonement of sins, stopped working.
Again, not entirely. That was the holiday of atonement. That was Yom Kippurim, Chag Kippurim. It's not the entirety of ritual worship. The holiday of atonement was only one day out of the year, and the high priest also had a lot to do with it. It could very well be that it was the high priest who was unworthy. It was the high priest that was not doing his job properly, which caused these things to happen. It's not necessarily to do with the crucifixion of Jesus. So I get what he's saying. And in that sense, he is correct where the timeline does add up and it matches.
This is a very awkward position for rabbinical tradition to be in. First of all, again, you'd have to presuppose that the rabbis have authority and that their claims are authentic, that
Yes.
prophecy had to end with Malachi in order to justify why no prophet came to rebuke these thousands of early Christians, Jews who became the early Christians. If they were committing a mass idolatry in Israel, why didn't God send a prophet?
Again, they were not necessarily committing mass idolatry because I believe that many of them thought, and I might be wrong here, many of them thought that he was Messiah. Many of them thought that he had died and resurrected and ascended. All of that has its roots in the Hebrew Bible. All of that has precedent in the Hebrew Bible. The only thing that does not is that he is God in flesh. There's no problem with being a Hebrew man at the time, believing that a Messiah of the line of David, of the house of Judah, right, or of the tribe of Judah, the house of David, was ruling and lived and died and resurrected and ascended. So there's, again, I take issue with this. There's a difference between believing someone is a Messiah or even a resurrected and ascended Messiah and between thinking that they are God in flesh.
And if you try to justify that there was no prophecy because Israel was so spiritually low, then you have to contend with the fact that there was a prophecy about the second temple being greater than the first. Why would there not be prophecy if the second temple was greater than the first?
Does greatness equal prophecy? Does it infer prophecy? Greatness can come in many ways, but let's keep going.
And how could the second temple be greater than the first if it didn't have any of the special covenantal things of the first temple? Well, that would indicate that Jesus coming to the second temple.
It had them, though. Once again, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there. That much is true. Other things were there. And they say that the temple that Herod built, right, or the additions that King Herod did, in spite of the major disagreements that he had with the leadership of the Jews at the time, and everything that came on, and in Rome and all of that, it's like he did a few really good things and a few really bad things. Let's make no mistake. But I think that he's making a very general, like a broad generalization, saying that the covenantal things were not there. That's not exactly 100% true, though I get where he's coming from.
Is what made it greater. And then finally, you have this really, really odd claim for the Talmud to be making that the Yom Kippur sacrifice system stopped working specifically right after the crucifixion and resurrection.
Didn't stop working, simply changed to indicate the well, what am I looking at? Well, the fact that the left side was growing stronger, that the dark side of the force was gaining in strength. That's not the same as not working at all. Okay.
Specifically the last remnants of a sacrificial system of atonement ceased to work right after the crucifixion, according to the Talmud, according to Jewish tradition. Now, some anti-Christian polemicists, Jewish apologists who live in this sphere may say, well, why are you using the Talmud to justify anything? Well, we've already made enough claims leading up to that, first of all, for this to be valid. But also, the Talmud being non-authoritative does not mean it has no accuracy whatsoever. And if the rabbis are not writing the Talmud specifically with Christianity in mind, it's a general Jewish document, they're not thinking about whether or not it justifies Christianity. They're just telling the history of what happened at that time period,
And by the way, even there, there's a difference of opinion in the Mishnah and in the Talmud in Tractate Yomah dealing with the Holiday of Atonement on what went on there. So it's not so cut and dry. It isn't.
referencing Yom Kippur, referencing the Day of Atonement. And they make it very clear that around that time, right after the crucifixion, the Yom Kippur, the last remnants of the Yom Kippur sacrificial system ceased to work, meaning atonement for the Jewish people ceases to function in the Jewish temple. Now, whether you agree with this, whether you think this is valid or not, I think it's some interesting food for thought.
Interesting, yes.
About how rabbinical Judaism challenges Christianity and how, as you try to go through those challenges, it gets more and more awkward. And at the very least, the most intellectually honest thing for rabbinical Judaism to do would be finally to admit that even if you don't believe Christianity is true, at least stop using these polemics that actually undermine Judaism and make it worse for Judaism at the end of the day. There was a famous anti-missionary rabbi who engaged in this, who was very critical of the other anti-missionary rabbis for engaging in these practices. He was very clear, you should not be using polemic devices to undermine Christianity that invalidate Jewish tradition.
Sure.
You can simply not believe if you don't want to. But it's very, very clear. These things about prophecies about the Messiah, these are Jewish ideas. Early Midrashic texts have similar ideas to what Christianity has as far as the divine nature of the Messiah and so on. Denying...
No. The Messiah is and always was a messenger of the divine. A man who is a king, an anointed king, who lives and dies like the rest of the kings of Israel and Judah before him. And while it does say that there will be at some point a final king from the line of David who will bring about a great paradigm shift, not only to Israel, but to all creation and all of that and everything that flows from that, it's not, again, he is making very broad generalizations, and it's not, there's nuance here is all I'm saying.
These aspects of Christianity as fundamentally the same as Judaism coming from the Bible is simply to diminish Judaism as well, purely for the sake of polemics. Now, if you like this video, if you found it insightful, please like, share, subscribe.
I did find it insightful.
It would really help me out with this channel. I appreciate your time. Leave a comment below if you found it.
Okay, wait, 10 more seconds. Let's give him 10 more seconds.
If you want to call me an idiot, do so in the channel.
You're not an idiot.
But call me an idiot respectfully. Otherwise, well, I'll respond in kind.
Okay, let's go to the chat. Wait, first of all, no. First, let's set up the next video.
To be honest, sometimes
Here it is. So the second video is Rabbinic Judaism is not from the Bible. Now, hold on a sec. Let's see. Okay, we're good with the video. Let's go to the chat. Hello, good people in the chat. Good evening from Jerusalem. It is 11:45 p.m. I've had a very long day, and I'm here doing this now, which is awesome, and I'm glad to be here. It's really, really fun. I hope that the audio and the video are good. I hope I finally got the settings right. I hope there's no feedback. I hope there's no peaking. I hope that you can hear me and the video, and... Oh, wait. It started... No, it didn't start. I'm just lagging here. Okay, that's fine. Hang on a second. I'll get to the live stream. Good. So. Wait. Yes, good. Okay. Let's read a few questions here. Shalom, says Am Yisrael Chai. The Jews are God's chosen people. Never forget. Well, it's not a question, but you say it every time, and I deeply appreciate the sentiment. Though, I don't go with the chosen people thing, but I understand those who do. Baruch Hashem, the Gentiles must follow the Noahide laws. Once again, I don't say what the Gentiles must or must not do. I have enough problems dealing with the things that I must do, and that I tell myself I want to do, and could do, and ought to do, and should do. To think that you can betray God multiple times, says Soranux, and still be his favorite is arrogance. No, I don't think it's arrogance. The Torah explicitly says that we can turn away from the covenant, but the covenant remains. We will get our asses kicked, right, with pestilence and famine and enemies and be cast out and exiled and be left like a tiny, tiny sliver of what we used to be, and yet the covenant still remains, right? And the merit of our patriarchs and matriarchs remains. And the covenant between God and the land and the people remains, despite our transgressions, despite our wrongdoings, despite us turning away. The covenant is there waiting for us to come back to it always. So, arrogance, maybe. But according to the Torah, it's like you can believe that without being arrogant. And that's something that I try to do, right? I don't mean to be arrogant in any way. I simply say, we betray God multiple times, and the covenant remains, and it waits for us to return to it, to atone, to return, to do what's right. And I don't think that's arrogant. I think that's literally written in the Torah. Now, if you want to claim that the Torah itself is arrogance and vanity, and that the Hebrew people wrote it in order to, self-aggrandize, okay, so I guess we don't really have anything to talk about, or maybe we do, but that's how I see it. Happy to be here, says Justin Union. Hey, Justin, good to see you again, man. Shalom, love the video reactions. Thanks, Don Perry, I appreciate that. Genuine question, says Jake. I am not an anti-Semite, and I understand there is hate in other religious script, but what are your thoughts on the hate in the Talmud? And I'm not Jewish, but have read the Torah. So I think that those who do hate in the Talmud, you need to take it in context of the nature of the time and place when it was compiled and canonized, a time when it was post Second Temple, it was destroyed, we've been exiled, the ongoing exile of Edom was continuing and ripping us to shreds. And I think that the people who compiled the Talmud, right, who was it, Abaye? No, I'm misspeaking. No, it was Abaye, Rava, I don't recall. The people who compiled the Mishnah, right, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and the Talmud, a couple of centuries later, I think they wanted to keep things together, right? They wanted to keep things together. This is evident from the way that halacha is treated. This is evident from the way that, again, the spirit of... No, I didn't get you? Next time. Get out of here. I don't want to kill you. Get out of my house. Mosquito. Okay. My thoughts on the hate is that while I might understand it in context, I do not share the hate towards Gentiles. I do not share the hate that some sages, not all sages, some sages do exhibit some sort of hate and some sort of disdain and dislike, and I can understand it why in context. I don't share that because I simply am more of a live and let live type of individual. I can afford to do it. I grew up here in Jerusalem, right? In Israel. So it's like I can afford to say that. Maybe if I was around at the time, I could not afford to say that, and I wouldn't be right on board. But it's this idea, again, of the Hebrew faith transitioning into survival mode for 2,000 years. That's no small thing. And it caused a lot of shifts in the way that the Hebrew faith was. I mean, we lost so many things during the course of exile. We gained things, but we lost so many things. The temple, right, not least. So those are my thoughts on the hate in the Talmud. Where is your skull cap, says Doobie? My hair, the Nazarite's crown of separation, that is my skull cap. Were I to put something over my head as a religious symbol, it would be contradicting my Nazarite hair. Now, not all Nazarites think this way, mind you. I do. It's something that I've come to realize is true for me. May not be for every Nazarite, but for me, that's why I don't wear a yarmulke, right? Because yarmulke literally means yareh mulka, which is yareh mulya, which means fearful before God. And the crown, the hair of the Nazarite's consecration, the hair of separation, that's something that already puts some sort of awe and some sort of positive fear of God in the individual. This has been my experience as a Nazarite. This has been my experience with other Nazarites as well. So, yes, that's what I say about that. No, it's not, says Doobie. Well, let's put it this way. The Nazarite's hair is from the Torah. The yarmulke is much, much later in rabbinic tradition. So I'd rather go with something that is from the Torah than something that is a much later addition to rabbinic law. You're making it up? Really, Doobie, I'm making it up? It's a verse in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, right? The Nazarite's hair is a crown of consecration. It's a crown of separation. The hair of the Nazarite man or woman is holy. That means set apart. And why is it that people wear skull caps? It is to set themselves apart and to bring a certain amount of awe and to bring a certain amount of fear and remember who it is they are standing before. And I managed to achieve this, at least in part, with the Nazariteship, with the hair of the Nazarite. So you don't have to believe it. I don't require you to believe me. I'm simply saying this is my experience. Sam says, Shalom Aleichem, Hebrew. Hey, Sam, how you doing, man? Nachtigall is having a schizo meltdown about Jesus, says Big Mac. Hey, Big Mac. Hey, schizo. Where is your tzitzit? I am a vegan. I do not wear tzitzit. The only time when you are mandated to wear tzitzit is if you wear a four-corner garment as clothing. So I take caution. You lowered a bit? Thank you. I take caution not to wear a four-cornered garment because then it would be mandated for me to put tzitzit on it. And since I am vegan, I do not wear tzitzit, I do not wear a talit. I do wear a talit if I walk into a synagogue, which I very seldom do, but in that instance, yes, I do put on a talit and I put it on over my head, again, instead of a yarmulke, because a talit is much more holy than a yarmulke by every measure. Greetings, Hebrew Naz, says Adi, and geeks and trolls, we love the Jews. Thanks, man. I give greetings by I ain't giving no damn salutation, said Soundgarden Savage. Hey, good to see you again, Soundgarden Savage. So yes, I wore tzitzit for most of my life, and then when I went vegan, I still continued to wear tzitzit, and then I stopped wearing tzitzit later on. Spam Christ is King, says Mr. Bob Boss PR. All right, go for it. By all means, spam Christ is King. It's all good. Bill, hey Bill, how you doing? The purpose of the Nazarite vow was to allow others not of Levi to live holy as Levites in kind. A beautiful way God granted his people to share serving so closely. I mean, it's true and it's not true because I am a Levite and a Nazarite, and they are very, very different things. Very different things. The Levitical thing, right? The priests are on the right and the Levites are on the left and the Nazarites are in the center. Like the higher form of Israel in that sense, right? Of the center pillar of the tree of life. So without getting into the whole thing, they are different divine attributes. What's up, doll? Okay, go for it. So the purpose is not to live like a Levite. The purpose is to live like a higher Hebrew man or woman. I mean, if there is a purpose, and there's no purpose given in Numbers 6, mind you. There's no reason given. There's no purpose given. Nothing. The only thing that it says is if you wish to make a Nazarite vow and you're a man or woman of the Hebrew tribes, here's how you do it. Here's what happens if you do it for a set period of time and your vow is, and the crown of your vow is defiled by death, and so on, right? That's all it says. There's no reason given, and there's no purpose stated. Let's be very clear about that. Is Nazarite similar to Karaite? No, a Nazarite is a man or woman of the Hebrew tribes who take on a Nazarite vow. A Karaite is a man or woman of the Hebrew tribes who do not go with the rabbinic texts, and they don't find the rabbinic law to be binding and authoritative, and they stick closer to the 5 books of Moses, and they have their own tradition of halacha. Shall we continue with the next video? Samson was under the Nazarite vow. Correct, Bill, and my vow is a Samson vow. That's the vow that I took. There are 4 different types of Nazarites, and the Samson vow is one of them. What's the tzitzit not numbers? Bwahahaha. Well, it corresponds to 613. I think your screen is half cut off. Thanks, Mama Luigi. It's good to see you again. Okay. Hey, Shoshana is here. How does one put on tefillin as a vegan? I don't put on tefillin. I put on tefillin, again, for most of my life, and 6 or 7 years into my Nazarite vow, I still continued to put on tefillin, but then I felt the very, very clear calling to stop the tefillin And after meeting with Rabbi Yehoshua Friedman, the Nazarite rabbi here in Jerusalem, in the old city of the Temple Institute, he told me that what I was feeling was correct. Some Nazarites wear tefillin all day. Some Nazarites do not wear tefillin at all. So what I was feeling was actually correct. There was something inside me stirring and calling me not to put the crown of leather and parchment of dead animal on the organic crown of the Nazarite, on the hair of consecration, on the crown of separation, and that was the right thing to do for me. There are Nazarites who wear tefillin the entire day, and I did that once or twice in my life before the vow, or more than once or twice, actually. So, hang on a second. Wait, I'm sorry. The chat just jumped again. Tzitzit is the easiest mitzvah to do, but you do your Nazarite BS. You can call it Nazarite BS, that's fine. I didn't say tzitzit is not easy. Of course tzitzit is easy. You make the blessing, right? You put it on, it's all good. And it's a very grand and amazing and worthy mitzvah. Really, truly wonderful. Reminds you of the covenant, reminds you of the Torah, reminds you of the commandments. It's a wonderful thing. We know the stories in the Midrash and the Talmud about the people whose tzitziot slapped them across the face. Reminded them of what it is they're supposed to be doing. And so, of course, if I do wear a garment of 4 corners, I will put tzitzis on it. The thing is, I don't wear the tzitzit because I'm vegan. I don't wear the tzitzit because it's not mandatory. It's simply something that if you do put on a garment of 4 corners, then you also must wear the tzitzit. So there's a big difference there, right? It's not a must. It's if you wear a garment of such dimensions, then it must be with fringes, with the tassels. Parvez says, bro, aren't you tired of explaining yourself daily and replying so much hate comments every day? No, not really. No. No, not really. Okay. How do you begin Nazarite vow, asks Don Perry. You make a vow before God. That's how you begin. There is vegan and non-vegan sacrifice at the temple. Both are correct. Tada. Yes, indeed. But it says in the book of Hosea, if I'm not, is it Hosea, that the vegan sacrifice of Yehuda and Jerusalem will be accepted later on. Wait, but someone asked something about the tefillin, and then the chat jumped. I want to get back to it because I only read half the question. Hold on a moment. I want to get back to where it was. Okay. How long have you been a Nazir? Shmuley says. I took my vow 16 years ago. 16 years ago. Helping JPS, Robert Algers. Hey, Solomon. Everett Fox, the Koren in Jerusalem. Which translation would you choose? I go with the JPS Tanakh. It's one of my favorites. I still would not translate it exactly as such. Nothing will replace the Hebrew. And nothing has the punctuation. And nothing has the te'amim. And nothing has the pisuk. But, and the crowns. But yes, that's what I would do. I would go with the JPS Tanakh. All right. Let's go with the second video. This second video is 24 minutes long. I hope I can do it. All right. Are you ready, good people? Let's go. Oh, so the title of this video is Rabbinic Judaism is not from the Bible, proof. So first of all, never in the Bible does it say there's allusions to it, but it never explicitly says there is a rabbinic tradition, an oral Torah, given alongside the Torah at Sinai. There are different verses in the Torah, different verses in the Bible that allude to it or make reference to it in sort of an indirect way. The more famous one is not all of the regulations and laws and details of the commandments are written in the Torah. And we do know for a fact that there were commandments given, like the Shemitah, right, the Sabbath of the land, with many, many, many different, right, in Parashat Behar, many, many different details and you know, like the minutiae, if you will, right, the intricacies and ins and outs of the mitzvah, of the commandment. And this is in part how we learn that all of those were given at Sinai, or at least the bulk of them, or at the very least a nice chunk of them. So let's go.
The claim of rabbinic tradition is that alongside the Torah given at Sinai, there was another oral law given
Once again, let me know if the video is working, if the audio is working. Okay? Okay.
alongside. And this was passed down from Moses all the way to what became the rabbis. And the rabbis have an authority going back to Moses to interpret this tradition. and it was only compiled in the 2nd century for the first time out of necessity, but it goes back all the way to Moses.
Sure.
Now, there are many problems and inconsistencies overall with this story, with this narrative, but the question is today, is this a true claim? And the answer is a resounding no. But what I want to do in this video is actually explain why. I want to explain why the rabbinic tradition that the oral Torah is a thing that goes back to Moses ever existed in the Tanakh.
Incidentally, I don't think that 100% of rabbinic law and halacha as we know it was given to Moses. To wit, there are certain parts in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, in the Midrash where it says halacha leMoshe mi Sinai. This is law to Moses on Sinai, which means that you can make the claim that all of the others where it's not mentioned are not from Sinai. Were the principles given? I think so. Were some laws given? I think so. Was all of it given alongside of it? No, I don't think so. But let's keep going. I'm sure he's going to make some very good claims. And, well, let's see.
And that the rabbis have any authority going back to Moses, that these claims are absolutely false. And we're going to show this from a historical perspective, from scripture itself, from contradictions between the oral law and the Torah, and just historical evidence overall that contradicts this claim.
Okay, now I, in my mind, already have a few instances and verses and passages, if you will, in the Bible and in the Mishnah that might give credibility to this claim, which is why I'm not here to debate him or go against him. Here I'm simply reacting. And I have no doubt that I will agree with many things that he says. Just saying.
Now, before we get into this, I don't usually do this in my videos, but I want to urge you to please like, share, and subscribe. If you appreciate this content, it would help me out a lot just to help with the channel. If you could like, share, and subscribe if you do appreciate these videos. Now, back to the main topic. What we're going to be doing today is demonstrating that the claim of Rabbinic Judaism, that the oral tradition goes back to Moses, that the rabbis have authority going back to Moses, that these claims are false. We're not going to get into what different groups of Jewish people say about, is it the whole oral Torah or all the debates in the Talmud actually cited at Sinai, simply that there is an oral tradition at all that goes back to Moses, and that the rabbis are a continuation of that authority. We're not going to get into too much detail about which claims, even at the most fundamental level, does that exist at all? Are those claims at all true? And again, I say no, and I'm going to demonstrate with evidence in this video. The first problem, and this should be enough for most people, is that the oral tradition, the oral law, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, as it's called, is simply missing from the Torah. It's not mentioned or referenced at all. It doesn't exist. It's never mentioned. None of the famous biblical figures are ever cited as doing anything from the rabbinic law, participating in anything from the rabbinic law, referencing the rabbinic law. The only time you ever see that is later stories, Aggadic stories in the rabbinic tradition about those biblical figures. But it's nowhere in the written scriptures. But for a lot of Jews following the rabbinic system, the stories about those figures being in the Tanakh are enough to move them in the direction of still believing it. And so what we need to do is actually present stronger evidence than that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to point to a series of verses from the Tanakh, mostly from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, as it were, that explicitly rule out the possibility of an oral law accompanying the Torah.
Now, I need to interject right here and say that one of the best, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, one of the best claims for the existence of an oral law is that it's said that should something be beyond your wisdom as a judge, and you can't make a ruling, you need to go to the priests and the Levites and the judges that will be there at that time, at that place, and do what they tell you to do, orally. Do what they tell you to do. Don't go left or right. Go down the middle pillar. Go down the straight path that they set before you. In other words, we see that not everything is written in the Torah to begin with, and the Torah itself says, should something be beyond you and you can't make a ruling, then go to the people who are in charge, right? And they will give you the law. Now, if it was simply a matter of pointing at the Torah, you could do that, meaning that there's probably something beyond that, that they would consult, that they would bring into the fold, that they would, or simply, they would derive from the written Torah an oral ruling. Here's how you should act in this scenario. So he's not, it doesn't say Torah shebe'al peh, oral law, right? The Torah that is on the mouth. That it does not say. He's 100% correct about that. Does it say that there is the possibility of later on at some point, right, in those days? Those are the words the Torah uses, at the priests and the Levites and the judges of those days. It's like there will be a time when something may elude you, and you will need to go to someone else and to a hierarchy which exists. And the Torah specifies, right, the priests, the Levites, the judges, and you should do what they tell you to do. And that is a major claim that's pro-oral Torah. All right, let's keep going.
In Exodus chapter 24, verses 4 through 7, Moses explicitly is said to be writing down all the commandments of God, and when he presents it to the Jewish people, they say they will do all of what God has commanded. Everything that God receives, that Moses receives from God, he puts into writing, he reads it to the Israelites, and they accept all of that teaching, all of that law. Exodus chapter 34, verse 27, God commands Moses once more, and this is showing, if anything, progressive revelation of the Torah within the written scriptures, no external, it's all written down in what we have today, written down as the Torah. But God explicitly tells Moses to write down his commands, write down all of these things, and with these things I make my covenant with Israel. No oral law mentioned, all the things that Moses is writing down. That's the covenant with Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 9.
Yes, there is a covenant of written Torah. That does not negate the existence of an oral Torah. So I don't get this verse. I don't know how he cites that as any kind of evidence, but okay.
Moses writes down the law again and gives it to the Kohanim, to the priests, the sons of Levi, who are the priesthood, and commands them to guard it. That is the prerogative of the priesthood, not the rabbis, and it's all written.
And he also wrote 12 scrolls for each of the 12 tribes. So it wasn't just the sons of Levi, it wasn't just the priests and the Levites who received a scroll. Each tribe received their own scroll, and from that copies were made later.
Written down. This is going to become important later when we discuss debates between factions in the Second Temple period. Enough of that for now. We're going to get to it later, but enough to say that the priests are given the law to uphold and to guard and to teach the people. Not a rabbinical class, not a teaching class, and no oral tradition. It's all written down and given to them. Deuteronomy chapter...
Again, the fact that there was a written Torah does not negate an oral Torah. So yes, the Torah scroll was written down by Moses, 13 of them, right, for Levi and the other 12 tribes, or, 12 tribes of Joseph, Binyamin, Menashe, Ephraim, 12 tribes. Not 13, but 12. They each received a written scroll. That much is true. This does not mean that they didn't have their own oral traditions that were passed down. I, once again, fail to see how it's only that. It's that, but is it only that?
Chapter 31, verses 24 through 26, God writes down, and it says explicitly, he writes down the Torah till its end. There's no oral Torah given. All of the Torah is written down till the very end. And he gives it to the priesthood again, and tells them to guard it. And he also says, this will be the witness against you, this Torah that you have written down. No
Yes.
oral law will be the witness against you.
No, the fact that he doesn't mention oral law and only mentions the written Torah doesn't negate the fact or the possibility of an oral tradition. Again, I'm not disputing what he's saying here. Yes, it's the written Torah is writing about the written Torah. That much is clear. We are talking here about actual physical scrolls that were written down.
Law will be the covenant with God. It is the written Torah, and no oral Torah is mentioned. It is all explicitly written. That's the covenant with Israel. That's the law that they are given, and that's what will be the witness against them. No oral tradition referenced or mentioned at all.
So
Joshua chapter 8, verses 34 through 35. Joshua gets up before the assembly of Israel, and it says he read them all of what Moses commanded. He read the whole Torah to them, and it says not a word of what Moses commanded did he not read to them. How could there be an oral tradition if all of what Moses commanded, which would imply anything else additional?
No, it would not imply anything else additional, because the written Torah represents a certain divine revelation in the world, and the oral Torah represents a different divine revelation in the world. And it could definitely be the case that what is meant to be oral remained oral until such time of exile and destruction and tragedy that it had to be written down out of necessity. It had to be written down out of necessity. It wasn't meant to be written down. It was meant to remain oral. The written was meant to remain written. The oral was meant to remain oral. So I disagree. Once again, I disagree. Because, yes, I do believe that Moses wrote it down. I do believe that he passed it down to Joshua, like it says in the Mishnah. I do believe that Joshua passed it down to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the people of the great assembly. And I also happen to believe that there was an oral tradition that went alongside that. The verses that he is bringing here from the Torah and from Joshua that speak of the covenant of the written word pertains to the written word. That much is correct. Everything that was written was read. Everything that was written down and given to the tribes. Everything that was written was put under guard. All of that is still correct. This does not negate the possibility of an oral tradition which accompanies it.
He read it all to them.
Yes, he did.
All of it was written down and read to them, not taught orally, written down and read to them, to all of
that
Israel.
was written.
Again,
yes.
explicitly excluding the possibility of an oral tradition of any kind.
I disagree with you, man. I disagree. I'm looking him right in the eye. I disagree with you. I agree with you that what was written, and what was written was read. On that we agree. Yes, you and I were agreed. Okay, cool.
And if there was ever a verse in the Tanakh that is an indictment of the rabbinical system, it's Joshua chapter 23, verse 6. He says to the people, Joshua does, to keep the Torah, the written Torah, and not to stray from it to the right or to the left.
Yes, and in the Torah, as I said right before we started this, in the Torah itself, the Torah that you're not supposed to go left or right from, not to stray left or right, it says that there will be a time perhaps when things elude you and are beyond your knowledge or your wisdom, and you should go consult the priests, Levites, and judges of those times, and they will tell you what to do. Do not stray from what they say left or right.
Now, this is another one of those passages that the rabbis co-opt, twist the meaning to the complete reverse, and say, oh, that means don't deviate right or left from what the rabbis say, or don't deviate right or left from what the oral tradition says. But it's
Can't it be both? Could be both.
Explicitly a written Torah that he's saying do not deviate from. Again, an explicit indictment of the idea of a rabbinical oral tradition. It says explicitly it's written and do not stray from it right or left. Now, if this wasn't enough that the Torah explicitly rules out an oral tradition,
see, again, he says this as an absolute, and each and every time I pause the video, I hit the space bar and I go, no, it is not an absolute. It is not an absolute. One does not negate the other. I mean, you can find places where you could say the rabbis negate the written Torah explicitly. This is not what he's saying. He's saying that the fact that there was a written Torah, the fact that there was a written covenant, the fact that it was read, the fact that it said that you should not stray left or right, and the fact that the rabbis sometimes twist things around, which sometimes they do, let's have no two ways about that. This means that there was no possibility at all of an oral Torah. That's making a huge leap, and I do not share that leap, personally.
Even if we were to say that maybe there's some teachings or traditions at all that go back to Moses in any way, shape, or form, we can rule that out as well, because it is obvious that Moses didn't have a tradition. Either that, or he forgot about it, or it failed miserably in its purpose, because there are numbers of verses, 4 explicit that I can think of, where it demonstrates that if there was ever an oral tradition given at Sinai, either Moses forgot it or it failed in its mission. Leviticus 24, Numbers 9, Numbers 15, Numbers 27, all cases where Moses doesn't know what to do, and he does not consult the 70 elders of Israel, who are the first Sanhedrin. He doesn't consult these people as some kind of bearers of an oral tradition. He himself doesn't know the oral tradition, so either he never had it or he forgot it. He consults directly with God, and he has to wait for answers because he simply does not know what to do. If there was an
Once again, this does not necessarily mean there was no oral tradition. I'm sorry to be like, a broken record here. I used to have a vinyl collection. I used to have a record player, but I digress. The idea of Moses appealing to the divine revelation rather than the 70 elders doesn't necessarily negate the existence of an oral tradition on other things. Do you see what I'm saying?
oral tradition, there would have been an answer there. Now, you might say, well, this shows progressive revelation and not all of it was written at Sinai. Well, exactly. God does have some kind of progressive revelation, but it's all written in the written Torah. Moses wrote these things down. It doesn't matter that he wrote one at Sinai. Everything is being written. That's why we have it in the written Torah. Even those events where Moses didn't know what to do, consulted with God, and got a new answer of what to do, he writes that down. That's how we have it today.
Yes.
And again, if that weren't enough, there is a passage in 2 Kings chapter 22 and 23 where it completely rules out the notion that there could be any continuity at all from Sinai with an oral tradition till today.
Ooh, before he says it, I'm going to venture a guess. Right? It's the time when Chilkiyahu found the Torah scroll in the temple. Is that it? Let's see.
Completely rules it out. Because in the time of King Josiah, Yoshiyahu, the entire nation of Israel has forgotten the entire Torah. The evil kings before have brought in idol worship. They don't know how to do worship of God. They're worshiping idols. They don't know the sacrifices. They don't know the holidays. They're not keeping anything properly at all, mostly out of ignorance. They just don't have the Torah. They don't know what to do. And what happens? The priest at the time and a scribe find the entirety of the Torah, present it to the king, to Josiah.
It's a controversy, a difference of opinion on whether he only found Deuteronomy or the entirety of the 5 books of Moses. Also, there are rabbinic, traditionally, right, commentaries and so on of the rabbinic strain, rebuttals for this claim that everybody was ignorant and it was all lost and it was found, and there are different interpretations here. And I don't want to misspeak because I have not read them in a while. But look it up if you want, the different commentaries which do go into how this actually came to pass and what it means. Also, let's not forget, the Bible is supposed to turn you back to the 5 books of Moses. That's what the rest of the Bible is for. The 5 books of Moses are there. The rest of the prophets, the writings, the scrolls are there to turn you back to the 5 books of Moses. That is why commandments do not appear in the rest of the Bible. No commandments. No commandments appear there. It's all supposed to turn you back to the original 5 books of Moses, the original Torah, the original covenant, and the commandments therein. And it could very well be that, look, the rabbis were the ones who compiled the Bible. They left many scrolls and books and prophecies and prophets out of it. If there was a chance that this would be construed as, oh, this is completely something which undermines the very legitimacy of the oral tradition which we say we follow and that we are a part of, then why would they keep it in? Why would the rabbis canonize the book of, right, these chapters in 2 Kings, in the 2nd book of Kings? If Mr. Mays here, it's so clear to him that this negates the very existence of an oral tradition, and the rabbis who are the keepers and the continuation of this oral tradition are the ones who compiled the Bible. You'd think they'd say, oh, we don't want that, let's lift that the hell out of there, they're gone, down the memory hole, like in 1984, boom, gone, erased, so to speak. But they kept it in. Ergo, it's there to teach us something, right? It's there to teach us something, not necessarily teach us history. It's there to teach us something about the nature of ourselves in the image of God, the divine revelation, the covenant of Moses and the 5 books of Moses, the Torah of the people of Israel, and the commandments therein. If the rabbis compiled the Tanakh, and the rabbis left many chapters, many verses, many prophets and writings and scrolls out of it, and they did, why would it have been such a schlep? Would it have been such an inconvenience to just lift those problematic oral Torah negating verses and chapters and out? No, it wouldn't be a problem at all. They were the ones in charge. They were the ones who compiled it. They were the ones who were the keepers of tradition of written and oral law, according to rabbinic tradition. Why did they leave it in? They left it in because it doesn't pertain to be precise, exact history. It's there to teach you something about who you are and what it is you are supposed to be doing in your life. These physical stories can be allegory and metaphor, and they can be archetypal stories. They can be things which cause a stirring inside of you, that cause you to think and wonder and be curious and expand your horizons. It would be only too easy, I'm sure, for them to just put it aside and bury it somewhere, right, outside in some other book or I don't know what, and not keep it in the Bible, which they compiled and which has survived for 2,000 years. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay.
Uzziah, Yoshiyahu, and what does he do? He repents. He completely changes
he
Israel
does.
back to
Yes,
the
he
law
does.
of God because they now have the Torah. So they didn't know it before. Now they do it, and they completely return to Israel. Israel completely returned to God. They tear down all the idols. They restore
they
the
do.
worship properly. They do the holidays properly. It says that it was the first time since the time
Passover.
of the judges that they did the Passover sacrifice
That's right,
properly.
that's right,
that they
that's
did
right.
that whole Passover properly. If there was an oral tradition going back to Moses, how could they have forgotten what to do? Even if they lost all the scrolls, somebody must have known what to do because the oral tradition accompanies the written tradition. So you'd have to know what the written tradition is saying if you have an oral tradition on it. This explicitly rules out that there can be any continuity from Moses till the rabbis of the Mishnah in the 2nd century. No continuity can be possible there at all, not even to the early Pharisees in the 2nd century BC. It can't exist. So even if you
Can't exist or doesn't exist in absolute continuity, because the Orthodox tradition is nope, it was unbroken tradition from Moses all the way to the Second Temple era of the Mishnah, just like he says. So it's not either or. It's not either it's unbroken or doesn't exist. I mean, maybe it's a little of column A, a little of column B in the sense that certain things were around and other things were not. Let's go to the chat quickly. It's been how long? How long has it been? Where am I on this video? Hang on a sec. 10 minutes in, just about. Let's go to the chat for a little bit. Fella on top is a video. Yes, it is, Chris. Yes, it is. I'm reacting. It's Nazarite Reacts. Chris says, there you go. Start with your trolling garbage. Are you talking to me or someone else? He's basically a living commentary right now, which is awesome, says Josh. Sorry, Job, the devil and I had a wager, bro, says Soundgarden. Yes, speaking of allegorical and metaphorical things which are supposed to teach you, something like Job. See what I'm saying? Scrolling down. Oh, it's a video. Yes, it's a video. It's a video. What is the Jewish opinion, says Seth, on prophets sent to other nations and not only Israel? That such a thing exists. The spirit of prophecy was taken away from Israel at the time of the Second Temple, traditionally, but not taken away from the nations, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, all right. Let's. Oh, hang on a second. I've been sticking up for him, just saying tonight he's not responding. Sorry, Chris. We're doing the reaction thing, and then I'll move over to the chat, and we'll be able to have it all out. Hebrewan, you know I appreciate your content. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Hey, oh, so very ordinary is here. Bill says, it's interesting that God used the disobedience to bless Abel instead of Cain, to bless Isaac instead of Ishmael. No, Ishmael was also blessed. To bless Jacob instead of Esau, Esau was also blessed. Don't make that mistake. Esau and Ishmael are both blessed as well. And to bless those who believe Jesus and not Sanhedrin. Okay? I'm not sure what you mean by that last one, but Ishmael and Esau both received blessings. Were there other prophets sent to potentially like North America or other places, asks Seth. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask around somebody who's more knowledgeable than I. Let's continue with the video.
Even if you did claim that you dismiss all of the other evidence showing that there's no oral tradition, and you claim that there was an oral tradition given to Moses, you have to understand that it can't possibly exist by the time of the Second Temple. So we have no mention of an oral Torah at all in the Torah. We have verses that explicitly rule out an oral Torah, and we have other passages that rule out the idea that there can be any continuity of an oral Torah from Moses till today, not even till the Second Temple period. But if that weren't enough for people, we have to look to the contradictions of the sages to the Torah.
And here he's going to have a lot of things to say that I agree with. Mind you, if so far I've been kind of disagreeing with him and pushing back against him, there will be things here where I agree with him that the sages, I mean, they interpreted the Torah, right? They interpret the Torah because it was given by people for people, right? People wrote it down, people gave it. It was by divine revelation to Moses, yes, but the written Torah was written down by a human being, right? Moses, traditionally, and others who made copies later. And the sages, the rabbis, the proper sages, the proper rabbis, mind you, who had smicha, who had the laying of the hands from Moses to Joshua onward until the times of the Roman Empire, they at time took liberty, great liberty, with the way that they interpret certain verses. So much that there are times when one sage says something about one of the verses in the Torah, and another sage goes, hey, what are you doing twisting and warping and perverting the Torah like that? So in and among themselves, there were controversies. There were great differences of opinion. It all comes down to what is the halacha? What is the rabbinic law? What is the path? What is the way? And that means it needs to be the type of thing, the type of way, the type of path, the type of ruling and law and obligation that the people can actually follow de facto in reality. Right.
Now, you might say, well, one sage contradicts it, but the other sage doesn't. Well, these are still all sages that we're citing as sources for rabbinical authority. So if they are contradicting the Torah, we can we not dismiss them as legitimate sources for interpreting the Torah?
I don't know about that. Look, the mere fact that there's a difference of opinion and controversy and discussion and debate and argumentative things in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, means that it wasn't so cut and dried. Means that there were different traditions because we come from 12 different tribes. There were different traditions because we come from different families within those tribes, different clans, yes? And that means, in essence, what it means is that things were not very, very clear because at the time, right, you had different rabbis and different sages who were teaching different things to different groups of people in accordance with what they believed was the correct way of interpreting the mitzvah and carrying it out, right? Such a commandment, whatever it was, and carrying it out. In other words, and then when halacha had to become this very narrow and strict thing, remember, we're talking about the Hebrew faith going into survival mode, going into this long exile. And so it was necessary to take this great path, this great way, and shrink it down into the 4 cubits of halacha that sustained the people of Israel in that great long exile. And this means that those 4 cubits of halacha, as it says in Tractate Brachot in the Babylonian Talmud, those 4 cubits of halacha, they had to be something which people could follow. It had to be something which would have some sort of a consensus among the sages, not even among the heavens, if you will, and divine revelation, but the sages that had to agree and say, yes, now this is halacha. You have this opinion and that opinion and that opinion, and, X, Y, and Z, and we choose halacha to be Y. Right? Not X and not Z. Does that negate the opinion of X and Z? For halakha purposes, yes. For traditional purposes, no. No. Because you had different rabbis, each with their own tradition. Oh, this mitzvah is done this way. No, it's done this way. No, it's done that way. All of which is true. All 3 methods, for all intents and purposes, X, Y, and Z, are true. They each cling to a different pillar of the tree of life, if you will, left, right, and center. And yet halakha can only be one. And I'm making a broad generalization here. There are people who have different halakhas, of course, especially since the exile. People who follow Ashkenazi halacha, Sephardic halacha, Yemeni halacha, Each one has their own ruler, their own posek, their own rabbi that they follow, and who rules on halacha for them if necessary. Sure. But generally speaking, if we're talking about the Mishnah and we're talking about the Talmud and about it being a book of discussion, why was there even any discussion? If there was an oral tradition, you would think it was very cut and dried, and this is what it was, all the way back to Moses, but no. We see that there were differences in opinions. There were different approaches. There were different traditions. There were different lenses through which these sages were viewing the Torah and extrapolating and divining halacha, right? And basically deriving halacha from it, or their opinion, which was or not made into mainstream halacha. The mere fact that it is a book of discussions, the mere fact that it is a book of debate and of argument, means that even if you say it went back to Moses at some point, and even if you say that Moses received one single path, the oral tradition and the written tradition, one single path, that you do not veer from left or right in the course of time, or from Sinai. It broke up. It fragmented. Maybe predetermined. I mean, maybe by design, 12 tribes, right? 3 pillars. Or maybe because of the way, right, the degradation of the generations, the descending of reality, as it's known. It fragmented, and so by the time it was time to write down the Mishnah, write down the Talmud a couple of hundred years later, and find those things from which halacha is derived, it had to be derived from a multiplicity of opinions. It had to be derived from a vast canon of knowledge and tradition and customs and different things that were added, and some things, like he's about to say now, that seem to contradict the Torah, the written Torah itself. Let's keep going.
And rabbinic tradition will say, well, they're all right. These and these are all words of the living God.
Exactly.
Which is a very easy and intellectually lazy cop-out, but it doesn't solve the problem. The
I understand why he calls it a cop-out. Let's just keep going.
sages that we look to contradict the Torah time and time again. So let's look to a few examples of that. In 1 Kings, you have the story of Elijah calling fire from heaven. God brings down the fire from heaven and consumes the altar, and then the people praise and worship God.
What a story.
The Talmud tradition, one of the rabbis says that if the people hadn't praised and worshiped God, the fire from heaven would not have come. What this does is not only fire from heaven would not have come.
Yes.
What this does is not only contradict the Torah, but it shows the pattern of the rabbis taking authority and power out of God's hands, authority away from the prophets of God, and putting it in the hands of regular people.
Regular people? By that rationale, prophets were also regular people, human beings made in the image of God. And if indeed the spirit of prophecy was taken away at the time and given to children and fools, there's no reason why one would be better than the other. And it is said that a sage is better than a prophet, although it was the sages who coined that phrase.
This is the core of rabbinic ideas. HaTorah lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven, they say. It is up to the rabbis, to the people
to interpret. It's not what they say. It's what the Torah says. It's not up in the heavens, and it's not across the great sea. They didn't say that. They are quoting the Torah directly.
Interpret it based on debate and majority. And this is another passage showing this pattern where they try to take authority and glory away from God and authority from his prophets and give it to other people. They reverse the story and say, if the people hadn't worshipped God, the fire wouldn't have come. But it's against the order described in the scripture. Then we have a rabbi from the Talmud saying that Job never existed, that the whole story is an allegory. And I believe this is a opinion echoed by the Rambam, by Maimonides, one of the great sages of Jewish history. Well, the problem is that Ezekiel in chapter 14 cites Job as a historical figure alongside Daniel and Noah as righteous individuals from the past.
That's right, he does.
So not only is he in the Bible cited as a real,
but once again, it was the rabbis who compiled the book of Ezekiel. It was the rabbis who compiled the book of Job and who added it to the Bible itself. Were it to contradict the very premise of their account as sages and knowers and rulers and leaders and legitimate authority of halakha and of Jewish law and thought, and they would not have added it to the Bible. They would say, what the heck? This is not going in there. Zoop, out it goes. Out it goes. So, I don't... Okay, let's keep going.
Person. Not only are other prophets citing him as a real person, well, not only is he in the Bible as a real person, other prophets are also citing him as a real person. Why would he be there if he wasn't real? Why would the Torah tell us he's a real person, never saying it's an allegory, only for rabbis of the Talmud to say it's an allegory? And
not the Torah, the prophets. The Torah does not mention Job as far as I know. It's the prophet Ezekiel. A great big distinction there. Remember, there is a hierarchy of revelation throughout the Tanakh.
A metaphor. But not only this, the rabbis in the Jerusalem Talmud, or at least one of the sages in the Jerusalem Talmud, contradicts that rabbi and says Job did exist, and he makes up his own story, how Job married the daughter of Jacob. So we have sages contradicting themselves, but more importantly,
Yes,
contradicting
all the time.
the written Torah. Now, this is a very
That's not the written Torah. That's not the written Torah. That's a prophet. Not the same thing, Mr. Mays.
interesting one. In Exodus chapter 4, the wife of Moses circumcises their child. It says she took a flint and she circumcised the baby.
That could be seen. That's ambiguous, actually. But okay.
Now, the rabbis in the Talmud are debating about which types of people are allowed to and not allowed to circumcise Jewish children. And one of the rabbis is trying to make the case that women are not allowed to circumcise babies. So he cites this story, but then he twists it and says, we know this because she didn't circumcise the baby. She took the flint. Don't read it as she took it. Read it as she took it for someone else. And don't read it as she circumcised, but rather she caused to circumcise, meaning she gave the flint to somebody else to circumcise. So he changes the story to prove that his case that women are not allowed to, under Jewish law, circumcise children. This is another pattern of the rabbis, taking the ability of women to do righteous things away from women in the Jewish people.
On that, sadly, I somewhat agree. It's the feminist in me that says, man, there are some things, and this is in part why I don't keep strict rabbinic law any longer, even though I don't rule out doing it again in the future. I grew up religious, Orthodox, modern Orthodox in Jerusalem, and in my in my later mid-20s, I decided to step back from keeping strict rabbinic law, also because of the way that halacha, over the course of history, has treated women. Simple and plain as that. On that, him and I are likely very much agreed.
It's another continuation of that pattern, and he warps and distorts a biblical scripture to make his case to that effect. And finally, we have a rabbi in the Talmud saying that, quoting Rabbi Yochanan, saying that anyone who says that the sons of Eli were wicked or sinful simply doesn't understand what's being said, or simply doesn't understand. The problem is 1 Samuel chapter 2 unambiguously cites them as wicked and sinful people.
Okay, so here's the thing. The same thing has been said about David, King David, right? There's a sage in the Talmud, I don't recall who it was, who says, whoever said that David sinned is wrong. To sin means to miss the mark. Technically, like literally, that's what it means. David did not miss the mark when he took Bathsheba. She was supposed to be his woman. That's in part why she is called Bathsheba, and he corresponds to the attribute of Malchut, and it's a whole thing. They were supposed to be together. The way that he went about it was highly questionable and not cool. The fact that they were supposed to be together, that is not missing the mark. That is hitting the mark dead on. So maybe, perhaps, it's that sort of thing, right? So it's not God the prophet, God or Natan? Which one of them? I keep mixing up the two, right? With the lamb, Kivsat Harash, the poor man's lamb. Is it God or Natan? I think it's God. I think it's God. God the prophet, right? And it's said, right? It says, David said that he sinned. And yet in the Talmud it says, is it the Talmud? I think it's the Babylonian Talmud. Whoever says that David sinned is wrong, is only wrong. Because David did not sin in being with Bathsheba. He sinned in the way that he went about, let's say he missed the mark in the way that he went about other things to do with it. Or so you may, or that's the case you can make. But he and Bathsheba were supposed to be together. That is not missing the mark. That is hitting the target dead on. Maybe the same thing, because I don't know this precise passage in the Talmud that he's referencing. It could very well be that the same sort of thing applies to the sons of Eli, the high priest.
So another example of the rabbis, the great sages of Israel, explicitly contradicting the Torah, or the Tanakh, as it were.
Oh, one more thing. And again, I don't know the reference. The written oral Torah, meaning the oral Torah that was written down, it was never meant to be written down, but it was written down, It has a physical element of the writing on the page, and it has an esoteric element, meaning that you have the parts of the oral tradition, right, the Mishnah and the Talmud, that pertain to life in this world and the carrying out of commandments, what is true and what is not, and what is kosher and what is not, and what is pure and what is impure, and how you should behave and how should you not behave halachically, what is the law, what is the way, what is the path, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. But that's the practical, physical implementation of what's written there as halacha is derived from it. But then there is also the inner layers of the Talmud that have esoteric meaning. Everything that's written in the Talmud is not all halachic discussions. Everything that's written in the Talmud and the Mishnah is not all debates having to do with practical implementation of halacha and the different opinions. There's lots of other things in there too. Which means that if it was just a book of halacha, or a place from whence halacha comes and is derived, then you would think that they would trim the fat and keep it very narrow. Here's what you do, here's what you don't do, and then halacha is derived later from the Savoraim, the Geonim, the Rishonim, the Achronim, and so on, right? The people, the halachic rulers who came after the time of the Talmud. But there are many other things written there in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, and there is a physical element to these writings or this oral tradition, and there's an esoteric meaning and an esoteric element to these writings, these books, these collections of texts as well. So when you see something that seems to be, let's say, completely contradictory, when you see things that seem to be completely batshit crazy in the Talmud, and you can find plenty of things that on the surface seem crazy, remember that on the surface, on the physical and practical level, it does seem crazy. If you get into the text, the way that it's written and what's right, and the way that it's being brought down, and you take it from an esoteric perspective, where every word has a meaning that is esoteric as well as physical, you're able to make connections there that are, and again, this is not a cop-out, I'm not contradicting what he's saying, I'm saying there is another element to the oral Torah. There is another element to the oral Torah. They say the written Torah corresponds with the Tiferet, and the oral Torah corresponds with Malchut. This is also brought down in the Zohar to some degree. There is an esoteric element that corresponds to the 10 Sfirot, to the Kabbalistic tree of life of the written Torah and the oral Torah. And that's something, I think it's something that helps to remember when you see things that are terribly incoherent and seem contradictory and all of that in the Talmud, in the Mishnah. Remember that this is the final outer layer, if you will, of something that has deeper layers within it. So, once again, I'm not trying to make some intellectual cop-out. I'm saying that part of the tradition of the Talmud is that it has a spiritual and esoteric meaning and element and layer and level to it. So even if on the surface, the physical level of the words seems completely contradictory, completely going against unambiguously, right, stating something and right, quoting, distorting things that are stated unambiguously, like with the sons of Eli here. That there's an esoteric meaning there, where what they wrote down is true on that level. So I don't want to make it seem as if I'm making excuses. Like I said, I'm agreeing with certain things that he's saying here, and we are on the same page with certain things. But I don't know, maybe I am sounding like it's just like an intellectual cop-out. Oh, there's a deeper meaning. Oh, well, then you could do everything and say there's a deeper meaning. You can say anything and do anything and say, oh, but you don't understand, there's a deeper meaning. So I guess it sounds a bit like a cop-out, I agree. But it's been my experience with the lore of the Tree of Life. The Torah does have a deeper meaning. The Torah does have this esoteric and very deep root to it that corresponds to the human being.
So we have no reference or mention of or to the oral Torah at all in the Torah itself, in the Hebrew scriptures. We have verses that explicitly rule it out as a possibility, and we have other verses that explicitly rule out the idea that it could ever be had continuity from Sinai till today. We also have various sages of Jewish history contradicting the Tanakh explicitly. But let's add a little more evidence to the case here. So we have the historical case that it can't possibly be true. The first time we see any oral tradition as described of what we know today is the Mishnah, really, in the 2nd century, compiled in the 2nd century, claiming to be from discussions from earlier. Right. It obviously is to an extent from at least the few centuries prior, but
Agreed.
Not earlier than that. It only cites people up until the 2nd century BC, which is not that far back at that time.
True.
They only pop up in history. The early Pharisees that then become the rabbis, they only pop up in about the...
The early Pharisees did not necessarily become the rabbis. That's, again, a difference of opinion on whether or not the Purushim, the Pharisees, were indeed the sages of... Well, anyway, it's not an absolute, but okay.
Middle of the 2nd century BC. But more importantly, they are at odds with other important groups at the time. Now,
Correct.
I want to say, obviously, the Sadducees, the priesthood was very corrupt. That's not the point here, and we're not going to get into the whole history of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. But needless to say, the keepers of the law of Moses, the priesthood, they didn't just politically...
Yes and no, because remember, even though the priests were said to get the scroll, the other elders of the tribes also received a scroll. And of course, there's no contradicting or debating, there's no contradicting the fact that the Torah mentions the tribe of Levi specifically, and the Tanakh, the Bible, mentions the tribe of Levi specifically being more of a carrier of that covenant, right? Carrying that tradition, but not only.
Disagree with the Pharisees. They didn't just dislike them. They rejected the idea that there could be an oral Torah. They don't just say, hey, we don't agree with your interpretation. They're like, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. Now, there were some priests that became Pharisees. There was some crossover there. But for the most part, the priesthood rejected the idea of an oral Torah completely. In fact, the rabbis in early Midrashic sources say that people who belong to the Sadducees are one of the only classes of people that burn in hell for eternity. I wonder why that is. But not only the Sadducees are rejecting the oral law, the Essenes are rejecting the oral law of the rabbis. Later, the Karaites are rejecting it. Now, you might say, well, okay, so all these various groups are rejecting the idea of an oral law because they don't want to give authority to the Pharisees, to the rabbis. So let's look a little bit further. Let's look at today's Ethiopian Jews. There is a group of people who are Jews, mostly in Israel today, who are from the Ethiopian Jewish heritage. They immigrated to Israel in the second half of the 20th century. They were kind of rescued, brought to Israel, and brought into Israeli Jewish life.
Mossad, baby. They made it happen.
Now, what's interesting about the Ethiopian Jews is that they are a Jewish people that go back to the First Temple period. They were exiled from the...
Some of them. I don't know if it's all of them, but yes, he is essentially correct. I'm not mistaken.
First Temple period and never returned to Israel. So they didn't experience the rise of the rabbis, the Second Temple period. They were very insular in their areas, keeping a Jewish tradition from Moses in their culture and community that goes back to the original Israelite Judaism, as it were. Now, they didn't just disagree with the customs and how to do the oral law and perform the mitzvot, the commandments of the oral law. They simply don't have one. They don't know what tefillin is, the phylacteries. They don't know about the customs of the rabbis. They don't know about the rabbinic tradition. And even if you...
You know what? It has been a very long time since I researched this. For now, I'm going to take his word for it. I don't know if what he is saying is 100% true. Or absolutely across the board. I don't recall. So I'm going to go with this. Let's keep going.
Say, well, they're a group that co-opted Judaism, if you want to make that absurd claim that they're not really Jews or whatever it is,
no.
You'd still have to, if Judaism had a rabbinic tradition and they co-opted it, they would have somewhat of a rabbinic tradition as well. So that's an absurd idea to begin with. But the fact is they are a Jewish community whose roots can be traced back to the First Temple exile, who upheld a Mosaic law and a Jewish tradition going back to the Mosaic law, and they have no oral tradition. Now, what's particularly sad about this story is when they were brought to Israel, they were forced to go, in many cases, undergo conversion processes.
Yes, the government and the religious establishment, they really mistreated the Ethiopian Jews when they showed up here. And I I don't know. Look, I'm just one small little man with a couple of brain cells fighting, hanging on for dear life. But I cannot, for the life of me, understand why that happened. If you look into the way that they were treated, you will find that they were mistreated on a few different levels by the establishment and the rabbinate. Now, look, it could very well be that there were considerations that I'm not thinking of. Again, I'm a very simple, uneducated, unlearned individual. So maybe, definitely, not maybe, there are things that I'm not thinking of. But still, to take these people, these Beta Yisrael, the Ethiopian Hebrews, and to force them to convert to Orthodox Judaism, that never sat well with me that they did that. Maybe it was a necessity. I don't know what the considerations were and I don't know. It just never sat right with me that they sort of told them, you got to do it now our way.
Through a
Continue.
rabbinic conversion, even though they're already Jews. In many cases, these symbolic conversions include a symbolic circumcision where some blood is drawn.
Yeah, but that's not only with Ethiopian Jews. This symbolic drawing of blood is also usually done if a man wants to convert and they are already circumcised for whatever reason, they draw blood there too. Usually, if I'm not mistaken, the blood of that covenant is something that has, again, symbolic and spiritual meaning and merit. Okay.
Meaning and degrading to a group of people who know that they are Jewish in their heritage, going back to the first temple to make them go through a rabbinic conversion, when they obviously are proof that the rabbinic tradition is false. And the more so I've heard, and I can't corroborate this, but what I heard is that leadership of their community was forced to go through an even longer rabbinic conversion process, sometimes up to 7 years.
I think that's true.
I can only assume to stamp out any notion that rabbinic Judaism is not real. But again, this is a whole side topic. It's just very unfortunate and sad. But
Agreed.
The Ethiopian Jews are proof in and of themselves that there is no such thing as an oral tradition going.
I'm going to pause him for a quick second. I want to check quickly, just very, very quickly. Hold on a second. So, okay. Let's see. Beta Yisrael did have an independent halachic tradition, different and more rich than the rabbinic Judaism, it says. And it was, right, so it developed separately from the other centers of Torah for hundreds of years. It was the Pshat, right, okay, the book of Hanoch. All right, all right. Okay. So it's not that they had no rabbinic tradition whatsoever. It's that they had a different tradition, not rabbinic, but they did have a halachic tradition. It simply wasn't rabbinic law. It was Ethiopian law, right? Their own. So again, it's not 100% correct.
Going back to Moses. Otherwise, if they had co-opted it along the way, they would have some rabbinic tradition in it, if the rabbinic tradition was there. And if not, if they actually do go back to Moses, as they claim they do, then the fact that they don't have an oral tradition is just as problematic for the rabbis as the other way.
I agree.
So we have historical evidence that the rabbis are a later invention, that there is no rabbinic tradition going back to Moses. We have scripture ruling out the possibility of an oral tradition.
Again, he keeps saying that. But you know what? Let's just go with this. Let's say that the modern day rabbinic Judaism, right, was the Hebrew faith was pushed into a corner, forced into survival mode. And so the rabbinic tradition evolved that way and took the place, right? The synagogues took the place of the temple, and then the rabbis took the place of the priests, and the prayers took the place of the ritual worship, and so on. The fact is that rabbinic Judaism survived and managed to keep the Hebrew people, I think, more than all the other sects, more than the Karaites, more than the Samaritans, more than any other sect. I think the people calling themselves the children of Israel, most of them were rabbinic Jews, Orthodox Jews, right? Even if it was only something which was done in order to go into that preservation mode, that survival mode, that 4 cubits of halacha mode, it served a very unique and necessary purpose. Now, it could be that I'm just thinking of it retroactively and saying, oh, they had no choice, it had to be done. I mean, for all I know, if we were all Karaites, we would have been able to survive. If we were all Essenes, we would have been able to survive. If we were all Beta Israel, Ethiopian Hebrews, we would be able to survive like they did. I don't know. It's very difficult for me to make these calls. So even if we say that the rabbis sort of introduced that false tradition, that false sense of continuity, they did it because they wanted the Hebrew faith, as they perceived it anyway, to survive this long and arduous, if that's the word I'm looking for, exile that was going to follow and was already there. I can't say I blame them entirely for doing what they did. You got to remember, there's a reason why the second temple was destroyed. Baseless hatred and constant bickering and fighting and killing of the sects of the Hebrew people, the remnants of the kingdom of Judah, could not abide one another. It was awful. They saw this and they said, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. We need to come up with something else. Something, a banner, right, that we can rally everybody under and around. That cause that is halacha, let's say. I think in the very same way where there are those researchers who say that the Canaanite tribes who became the tribes of Israel conjured up the story of the Exodus from Egypt in order to rally the people around the worship of the one Hebrew God, you could say in the very same way, and I'm like borrowing this in a way, right, and this academic idea, this research idea, and saying that it could be that the sages wanted people to rally around, seeing all the baseless hatred and seeing the destruction of the temple and seeing the aftermath and the slaughter and the exile and the revolts that were put down very cruelly and very, very terribly. And they said, okay, we can't keep going like this. Something needs to change if we are going to survive this exile. So did they do it in the best way? No. They are only human. Maybe you could make the argument that they should not have done what they did. But it did, without a doubt, help the children of Israel survive this long process of exile. And so I, right now, sitting here in Jerusalem, right, in Israel, a sovereign nation, with my brothers and sisters around me, I can sit here and say this from the comfort of my own home. That is an amazing thing. I'm not going to pass so much judgment over those who were going through all of this exile and woe and destruction and tragedy and hatred and fighting amongst each other. I mean, there's a bunch of fighting going on nowadays in Israel. The in-group, out-group bullshit within the Jewish people. That's also why I don't consider myself religious. I found too much division there. Why I don't wear a kippah. I found too much division there as well. Nazarite-ship aside. It's why my children are not Nazarites, but they don't wear a kippah for that reason. For that reason. It's too divisive. That's why I simply identify as a plain, simple Hebrew man, no more, no less. And it could very well be that Mr. Mays is sitting here in judgment of the sages and what they did and making shit up. I think that they had the right I think that they had the right goal and aim. They had the good of the people of Israel at heart. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, they say, and maybe this is one of those cases. Is there absolutely no merit to any rabbinic law? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I think there is merit to plenty of rabbinic law, and yet, right, I still maintain it's a wonderful path and it's a great way. It is. I always tell people, you want to be Jew, follow halacha. If you want to break away later, by all means do, but follow halacha, at least for a time. It will lead you. That's what halacha means, to walk a path. Let's continue.
And we simply have the fact that it's not mentioned at all anywhere in the Torah. Now, I want to be very careful here before I close up. I value Jewish culture and tradition, having grown up in it, living as an Orthodox Jew most of my life. There's a lot of beauty in Jewish.
I gotta say, I'm having this deja vu of having done this reaction to this video before. Could it be that I already did this one? I definitely did not do the first one. Did I do this one? I seem to remember this video, and I don't know if I reacted to it live or not. I honestly don't know. And I don't mean last week's failed attempt. I mean, I think I've done this before. And I think I made the same arguments, and I think I said the same things, or I don't know what, but it's late. My brain cells, the few that are still there, are starting to disintegrate.
Culture.
But still, I'm going to press on.
Even in things that theologically I might disagree with, even if I don't agree that the rabbinic tradition goes back to Moses, there's a lot of Jewish culture that I really love and adore, and
Same.
that is really
Same.
beautiful in its nature. The Jewish community has a lot of beauty in it from these traditions. So I don't want to sit here saying that the Jewish community is bad because they believe in rabbinic culture. That's not what I'm saying at all. That being said, I do want to point out that one of the most problematic things with the rabbinic tradition is some of the toxic fruits of its belief system.
Agreed.
If the Jewish community could do away with this notion that it is divinely inspired, that the rabbis have some kind of Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration to their rulings and debates, and simply accept it as a tradition, then they could do away with all of the problematic parts, and they could keep their beautiful traditions without claiming that it's from God. It could just be your heritage and your culture. There's no problem with that. The problem is when you claim that these rabbis, all of what they say, all the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, these and these are all words of God, you have a really big problem because of some of these sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud said some pretty wacky things and some pretty vile things. Even later rabbis that we hold in great esteem in Jewish culture have said some pretty problematic things.
Agreed.
Whether it's Rabbi Gamliel, who's one of the greatest sages in Jewish history, saying that to test a woman's virginity, you can sit her on a wine barrel and smell her breath, and if the wine smell comes through, she's not a virgin. Very scientific and a little.
See, this is one of those things where there's an esoteric meaning to that phrase. And physically it sounds, again, weird-ass, wacky, as he said, but the deeper meaning of what Rabban Gamliel is talking about is, well, I mean, there's a deeper meaning there, right? The wine and the woman and the breath, but okay.
Bit disgusting. Whether it's the rabbi sitting having discussions about which parts of a young girl develop first, don't know why that's necessary to know about. Whether it's Maimonides promoting and condoning the extrajudicial murder of other Jewish people if they deny the authority of the oral Torah without trial. He literally says to push them in a pit if you can and don't help them out if you can't get away with killing them publicly. These are incredibly problematic teachings. The fact that in the circumcision ceremony today, rabbis are still, now they do it usually through a glass tube today, not directly, but sucking out blood from the circumcision wound because of some claim to medical science from a crazy rabbi in the...
Yes, the famous Metzitza B'Peh, which is not a necessity for kosher circumcision. The first two parts, Milah and Pri'ah, are necessary for a kosher circumcision. The third part, Metzitza, is not necessary for the circumcision to be kosher.
Second century, this stuff is incredibly problematic. So not only did I want to make this take this time in this video to explain why rabbinic Judaism is obviously false, I also wanted to take this moment to urge any of my fellow Jews watching, make the separation. If you find beauty in Jewish culture and you find that as a way to connect with God, great. Do it. It's fine. However, by calling it divinely inspired law that goes back to Moses, you are actually condemning yourselves to believing in insane things. You're putting yourself in that bucket with crazy people that say these things are actually divine law from Moses that you have to keep. That all of these sages were geniuses and brilliant and inspired directly by God. You have to then accept all the crazy things they say. So I urge my fellow Jews watching this, make the separation. Take the time to think about it, understand
Which I have, and I do.
the evidence, distance yourself from the idea that this is divine law, and accept it as a beautiful tradition for yourself if you love it, if you want to do it, if you find it as a way for you to connect to God. But understand that it is false in what its claims are. It is false that it goes back to Moses. It is false that it is biblical. It is false that it is from God. That's the case that I'm making in this video. Again, if you found this video interesting, please like and share and subscribe. Send it to people. If you disagree with me, feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Again, keep it respectful. I will respond with the energy I am met with.
Okay, now let's get rid of this. Boop. And let's make this a little larger. Put me in the center. Me! Okay, not too much in the center. Okay, wow. It is already past midnight. What am I gonna do? I wanted to go only for an hour, and it's been over 2 hours, right? Something like that. Yeesh. Okay. Okay, wow. So much here. You've heard the reaction. All right. All right, all right. Let's just go with the chat. I'm scrolling down in the chat, scrolling down, scrolling down. Let's see. Who is this clown on top, says Ching. Ash Maze is the clown on top. That was Ash Maze, and I think that he was is a Messianic Jew. If I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken. Maybe he's a Karaite, maybe he's a Messianic. I don't exactly recall. But okay. Make hummus great again. Oh my God, there's such good hummus in Jerusalem. I mean, all over the country. But oh my God, hummus Talpiot, hummus Eliyahu, the hummus of the Arab villages around oh, so good, so good. Okay. I like that ending, says Scripture Science Sense. Hi, Scripture, how you doing? You look like your breath would smell, says Ching. No, it's pretty good. I actually had a mint earlier, so not that it survived and is still minty fresh, but it's not bad. I also had a cup of tea. What was it? It was Turkish apple. So it's apple mint something. The synagogue of Satan resides in Jerusalem 2026 at Savage Glizzy. Is it Glizzy? Gilzy? Hi, Glizzy. Hi, Savage. Hello. Hi, hello. How are you? Yes, many people say that the Jews are the synagogue of Satan. I've heard many Christians who contradict the very premise of making that assumption or that claim, and who claim it's simply Christians who say that they are Christians, but they're not really Christians who are the synagogue of Satan. So take it up with your fellow Jesus followers. Howdy from Arizona, says I'm not sure you two. Hi, hello, good to see you again, man. Very good to see you again. Hey, America First is here. What's up, bro? Hey, brother, can we shout out Oliver Tree and the passengers? R.I.P. Very sad. Chris, what? Oliver Tree and the passengers, R.I.P. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Did something happen? Likely something happened that I'm not aware of. Yorker is here. How you doing, man? I was watching you, but loved listening. I was watching you, but loved listening to you. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Hey, E-Dog is here. Good to see you again. Tenebris is here. How lovely. You know your existence has a time limit, don't you, Jew? Says the dented helmet. Yes, we all are living a temporary existence. The thing is that that only pertains to this world and to this life. And there will be a time, hang on a sec. There will be a time, wait, no, I want to make it a little smaller. There, that should be good. There will be a time, well, let me get rid of this. When we partake of the fruit of the tree of life, and we're able to have something that is beyond time and space. Jews aren't going anywhere, says Justin to the dented helmet, but you could go to a library. Yes, couldn't we all? We could all go to a library. Coin clippers are the devil people, says love and live God. Okay, who are coin clippers, and what kind of devil people are we talking about here? Who is Oliver Tree? Indeed, I don't know, Big Mac Orange. You know as much as I do, it seems. Nothing is in Gaza as it's portrayed. Fake news, says Chinga Pinchi. Hi, Ching. I don't know if it's nothing, but many things definitely are propaganda. Israel is a terrorist nation. Yes, Savage, we know precisely what you think, thanks to that completely asinine claim. Derp, hey, good to see you again, man. Tenebris, no other group that consistently lies for each other like the Jews except politicians. Really, I'm curious, what are you basing that on precisely? Exactly, what are you basing that on? How on earth could you make that claim? You seem to know all groups of people, and knowing them, you have come to the conclusion after doing your due diligence and proper research and are saying that no other group does it like Jews. So there are so many groups in the world, and yet 14, 15 million people, those are the ones that... Come on, what is this bullshit? Josh says, it is actually potentially possible that Satanists are literally less bad than Christianity. Well, look, it's not a religion. It makes, the modern day Satanists are the ones who make fun of organized religion. That's part of their thing. They have a very humanistic or humanitarian, I guess, approach. Hamza says, hey, bud, always good to see you live, and it's good to be seen, Hamza. Hi, how are you? Everyone wants to be Jewish, Soundgarden Savage says. Really? Where are you getting that from? I don't think that's the case at all. That's just me. I might be wrong. I don't think everyone wants to be Jewish, nor should everyone be Jewish. That's not the point of Judaism. Yorker says, Jonathan, today Israel bombed Beirut for provoking Iran and to disturb the peace deal between Iran and USA. Opinion on that? Well, first, I don't, as you know, I don't follow the news. This is the first that I hear of Israel bombing Beirut. So I don't know, is it to provoke Iran, or was there some sort of Hezbollah gathering going on there? I have no idea. Before I have an opinion on it, I'd have to actually read some commentary on some news with a grain of hummus, right? But well, let's take what you're saying at face value and say that it was to disturb the peace deal between Iran and the USA. Why would what Israel is doing disturb the peace deal between Iran and the US? It seems to me that if Iran and the USA want to make an agreement and bring the war to an end officially on a piece of paper, Israel is simply going to have to suck it up and deal with it insofar as those two nations are concerned. Where does Israel come in, and why would that sabotage the efforts for a peace deal between Iran and the USA? I honestly don't know how you can infer one from the other. Unless the Israeli government or a spokesperson literally came on TV and said, hey, we did that in order to disturb the peace. I don't know what to tell you, man. Silent9 says, when are you and that Rasta streamer doing a collab? That would be cool to see. Which Rasta streamer, Silent9? Are you talking about Costa Tosta? I want to make that happen. I discovered his stream about a month ago, just scrolling the lives, which I started to do about a month ago. It's really wonderful. There's a little community there of live streamers from Israel, and it's lovely. But yeah, I do want to do that. And is he a Rasta? He doesn't strike me as a Rasta. Maybe some of his opinions and values are akin to Rastafari, but I think he gets that simply from the people of Israel here, not necessarily from Rastafari. But yeah, I'd like to do that. Chris says, I don't agree with everything, but he's a real dude, transparent and understanding. Most people here are drunk hillbillies who make up things about Obama to make them feel better about voting for Trump. Well, I stay away from politics like the plague, so. Hey, Lovecrafts is here. Rabbi Shapiro Mesnaldo. Hi, Mesnaldo. Rabbi Shapiro said being a Jew is someone whose religion is Judaism and uploads, I'm assuming you meant upholds, the 613 laws of the Torah, and it's not a race or an ethnicity. Well, look, Jew is the remnant of the kingdom of Judah. Judea is a place, Judah is a tribe, the kingdom of Judah is a kingdom. Halachically speaking, if you are born to a Jewish mother, you are a Jew. Now, you can be a Jew that does not keep the Torah, which makes you, let's say, a transgressing Jew, but a Jew nonetheless. There is the idea in the Torah of what's called karet. It's something that is not mandated or carried out by the court system in Israel. I mean, the Hebrew rabbinic court, the religious court, the Sanhedrin, if you will. But it's carried out by a higher power. So it's nothing that we can actually do or carry out, that sort of punishment. And what karet literally means, it's not exactly explicitly said what it means, but what it basically means is that you get cut off from the branch of the Hebrew faith, from the branch of your people. So, of course, nowadays, you could very much make the argument that people who don't keep the commandments simply don't know any better. And I don't mean to be condescending. I mean to say that this is how some halachic rulers actually say, yes, it's the same ruling and the same halacha of, let's say, a young child who was abducted by Gentiles and raised as a Gentile, not knowing that he is Jewish, ergo also not keeping the commandments of the Hebrew people. In the very same way, he's not responsible for it. It's not as if he knew it and turned away. He simply didn't know any other way. This is how he was raised. He was taken from his family and raised in a different fashion. In the very same way, they say, modern-day rulers of halacha and others, that people nowadays who are Jewish, who do not keep the commandments and the Torah and so on, you can liken them to those who were taken away and grew up not knowing. I mean, and some people say that is exceedingly presumptuous and condescending. I'm just saying that's one way of thinking about it. Not to say that you should treat them as infants who don't know any better, but simply conceptually speaking, that is something where you have, let's say, allowance, right, to still be Jewish and still count among the Jewish people. I understand what he's saying. The Hebrew people were here to keep the Torah. If we're not going to keep the Torah, we have the physical things keeping us together, but the glue that binds us together is that spiritual life. The glue that binds us together is the faith, is the Torah, is the commandments, is the covenants that we share. I understand where he's coming from. Of course, nowadays it's also the suffering that we share and the hardships that we share, the tragedies that we share, and all the rest of the yuck. Jewish is an ethnicity, not a race, says Justin Union. Yes, there's so many. It's such a difference of opinion on what is the nature of Judaism. Who knows? Yorker says, can you please explain Isaiah 53? So many Christians and many followers of Yeshua throw Isaiah 53 around, and once again, the same claim that I made about Mr. Mays, about Ash Mays. It was the sages themselves, the rabbis themselves, who compiled the book of Isaiah and included the chapter of Isaiah 53. They didn't have to do that. If it was so explicitly talking about Jesus, which it's not, it's talking about the people of Israel at large, it's metaphorical, then they would not have kept it in. Something that so blatantly and explicitly talks about Jesus, they would not keep it in there. Definitely not at a time when Christianity was taking hold and many thousands of people were pulling away from the Hebrew faith and joining Christianity en masse. They would not keep it in the Bible if it was something that undermined the very idea of the Jewish faith versus Christianity, which was gaining prominence. European Jews are from Khazari tribe. Mesnaldo, no, that is demonstrably false and factually incorrect. That is definitely not the case. But okay. Is weed legal in Israel? No, you two. It is decriminalized, but not 100% legal. On that happy note, I think I'm going to say goodbye very soon. But okay. Shiva, hey Shiva, I think you've been here before. Good to see you again. If not, welcome. Give me some advice about how to study. I won't be able to do that because that really, really depends on your temperament, your abilities, your field of study. So I have no idea. What I will say is, don't treat yourself like a savage tyrant. You need to romance yourself. You need to entice yourself. You need to lure and tempt yourself into study. Whether it's a reward system or whether it's some kind of other thing that whatever turns you on, that should be the thing that guides you. If you don't want to study and you need to force yourself, the best way, and this applies to a lot of people, though not absolutely across the board, you need to not be a tyrant. Don't crack the whip. You need to figure out a way to negotiate with yourself so it will be worth it for you to do it. And sometimes, oh, the grade of a good and well written paper or exam is well enough. No, screw that. No. It needs to be something you actually want, that you can bring into this equation that will entice you into putting in the effort. But let's continue reading the chat. I'm preparing for a competitive exam for selection into medical college in India. Good luck. Wow, 2.5 million people write this exam. How are Jews so good in studies? Well, I'm not good in studies. I have no idea what other Jews do. I know what I like, but I was not a good student. And in yeshiva, it's not the same type of study at all. It's different, right? When you study Mishnah, when you study Talmud, when you study Halacha, when you study Hasidism, when you study mainstream 5 books of Moses, when you study Hebrew philosophy, it's all very different. The across the board advice that I could give, if any exists, is you need to negotiate with yourself and you need to entice yourself. You need to make it worth your while truly. So you will be excited about putting in the time despite the major pain in the ass that is studying. But I don't know your circumstances and the intricacies. I don't know if you're a better crammer or if you're a better spreader outer. You see, 2 different types of temperaments, 2 different types of brains, maybe, 2 different types of modes of study, both of which can be as effective as the other. Either one of which can be effective as the other. Yo, my homie is live. That's right. Studimus, how you doing, man? What time is it in Israel? It is 12:24 a.m. It's 5 p.m. here. Why do you believe in God? Also, please don't say turns you on. Really? Why do I believe in a God? I received proof. I received incontrovertible, indisputable proof just for me, personally. That doesn't apply to any other of the billions of people who have ever lived on this precious little blue marble we call Earth. I, for myself, asked the questions, plural, put forth the arguments, and came to the conclusion from inside and from outside that yes, I do believe in a creator. I do believe in a creator that created me in a very solipsistic sort of way, not a psychopathic sort of way, but a solipsistic sort of way, where it's just for me. It's just my thing. I believe in no God, says Wolfman. Yeah, you know what? That's right on. Many people don't believe in a deity, and there's nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned. If you love to learn, says Ching, and live the subject and are inquisitive, then study is fun actually. Yes, being curious. Being inquisitive and curious can make it that much better. But when it comes to medical studies, with all of the procedures and all of the acronyms and all of the I don't know what's, I don't know how you can approach it. I don't know. You need to have such an organized mind, it would seem to me. I have no idea. No idea. Alex says, Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri, I know what you're going to say. False. That did not happen. But okay, let's read it anyway. Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri confessed through a note that Jesus was the Messiah before he knew he was about to die. Again, that is false. That is not what happened. In fact, I'm going to Google that right now, your entire comment. Let's see what AI says these days about that. The claim that prominent Israeli Kabbalist Yitzhak Kaduri left a note declaring Jesus as the Messiah is one of the most highly debated modern religious mysteries. The controversy centers on an alleged note left by Rabbi Kaduri before his death at the age of 108 in January 2006. According to his instructions, the sealed envelope was opened a year later. The note contained the following Hebrew verse: Yarim ha'am v'yochiach shedvaro v'torato omdim. Okay. So what's the controversy? Rabbi Kaduri's son and close disciples in mainstream Orthodox community strongly dismissed the note as a forgery or misinterpretation. Okay. They argued the rabbi's physical condition at the end of his life made it impossible for him to write it, and that the text is an acrostic rather than a direct confession. What? I'm not exactly following. The first letters of each Hebrew word spell out Yehoshua, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus. That's not true. The Hebrew name for Jesus is Yeshua, not Yehoshua, but okay. This led Messianic Jewish groups and Christian believers to claim that the rabbi secretly confessed that Jesus was the Messiah. So, first of all, it's not an absolute, and it's highly debated. So it's a controversy of opinion, and I don't quite understand. So what if there's an acrostic? That means absolutely nothing. I don't exactly know what you're saying. Let's continue. Does it matter if someone else wrote it? So-so. Hi, so-so. Hello. Does it matter if someone else wrote it? Maybe. Google where humans come from and Google where stars come from, says Wolf. Well, look, I don't necessarily take Google as gospel, but I wanted to know what AI would say just right off the bat. America First says, is it wrong to wear noise-canceling headphones with a newborn? Yeah, likely. If you want to pay attention to it, yes. Are you wearing a yarmulke? No, I am not wearing a yarmulke. I do not wear a yarmulke. I have not worn a yarmulke in a very long time. Okay. Okay. I am going to say goodbye. I've been on for what, 2.5 hours? Something like that, or almost 2.5 hours. People, over 2 hours anyway. This has been so lovely. I thank you, each and every one of you, those watching now, those watching later, the lovers and the fighters and the haters and the Nazis and the trolls and the spammers and the, every like and every sub and every view and every chat and every comment and everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and me, which is all three. I really appreciate your time and your kind and gentle attention. This has been, finally I was able to get the settings right and the audio and the video were working. I'm so happy that you were here with me for this Sunday reaction. Tomorrow is Mesilat Yesharim Monday. We are continuing down the path of the just. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Tomorrow, 10 or 11 Israel time, we'll be going for Mesilah Monday. On Tuesday, we will be going once again with the Tao Te Ching. Wednesday, I'm going to go on a walkabout outside somewhere in Jerusalem. And Thursday, we will be going through some of the mistranslated or lost in translated verses on this road to 10K this June, special June broadcast formatting. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I truly and really am. So, be blessed, be a blessing, be a light in other people's lives, be the reason why people say, maybe there is some good anyway, and after all, that exists in the world. Be the reason why why a person's face might light up. And I really do appreciate the comments and the chats. If I didn't get to you in the chat, leave a comment. If you want to hit me up in the DMs, Hebrew Nazarite, look for my tree on X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I don't post there really, but I'm there for the DMs, and I love doing that when the situation presents itself and I'm able to have the time to do it. The comments have been a little off with YouTube the last couple of days. It seems that maybe it was straightening out, but I wasn't getting any notifications of any comments, and comments were disappearing, and parts of them were there, parts of them were not there, and let's hope that that worked itself out. Either way, I will see you on the next live stream tomorrow, God willing, maybe tomorrow morning, maybe tomorrow evening, maybe both, where the wonders never cease. Until then, peace and love. It is a new moon. It is a new moon. Tonight is the last of the moon of Sivan. Yes, and tomorrow night is a new moon. I think, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow night is a new moon, so we will have even more reason for celebration and positive new moon vibration. Until then, I will say good night and goodbye from Jerusalem. This has been so much fun. Thank you.